So, if you thought that Bernie Sanders basically making Jeff Bezos bow down and raise the minimum wage of Amazon workers to $15 an hour, a huge accomplishment. Frankly, Bernie Sanders has accomplished more since he lost the presidential election than the entire Democratic Party has accomplished, maybe in the last, since Obamacare. I mean, I have my gripes with Obamacare, but it was an accomplishment. But other than that, Bernie Sanders making the richest man in the world raise minimum wage to Amazon workers, pretty damn good accomplishment if you ask me. So you would think, oh, okay, Bernie said nice things about Jeff Bezos after he raised the minimum wage. Jeff Bezos kissed back on Twitter and thanked Bernie Sanders. All is well in the world. And now Bernie Sanders could move on to, going after McDonald's and the Walmart and all these people. Well, you would be incorrect, because Jeff Bezos owns a newspaper, if you want to call it that, called the Washington Post. Their slogan is "Democracy dies in the darkness." And if you've been paying attention the last few years, the Washington Post attacked Bernie Sanders 16 negative stories in a day during the 2016 campaign. I mean, that's pretty hard to do. Like Fox News, they used to do like 16 negative stories in an hour on Obama, but 16 negative stories for like a quasi-reputable paper, that's a lot. That's a lot. So I did the math, and I was thinking before Amazon increased the minimum wage, Washington Post had like one negative story per month, I would say, on Bernie Sanders. And when I say I did the math, I didn't really do any math. I'm just talking shit. But just my guess. The Washington Post was doing about one negative story on Bernie Sanders a month. Now I'm going to guess it's closer to once a week. It's about once a week now. So obviously Jeff Bezos, because you don't get to that level of richness without being a colossal narcissist, possibly a megalomaniac, definitely a social Darwinist. But Jeff Bezos did not raise the minimum wage because he's a good guy. Jeff Bezos didn't raise the minimum wage because he cares if his workers can eat or feed their children. He did so because it was an untenable position. Bernie Sanders was so eloquently and efficiently shaming him. But now the Washington Post, who claims, oh no, we have nothing, Jeff Bezos might own us, but we don't do Jeff Bezos bidding. No. Now I'm thinking I'm going to start really clocking it. I even bit my tongue and I purchased a Washington Post digital subscription because I want to monitor. I think the Washington Post and the New York Times, if Bernie Sanders runs, it's going to be like 2016 times 2. They are going to double down and triple down on the Bernie hate. And it's already beginning to start, so I want to observe it and make sure you guys are informed about what's going on. Because one thing I think was pretty much lacking in 2016, it's one thing to protest political causes. There wasn't a lot of protests outside the Washington Post or the New York Times. There was one, I believe, outside CNN in Los Angeles. But you got to put some shame and pressure on these media outlets that are actually doing public relations for the Democratic Party. Geraldo Peralta, let's welcome their hatred. That's funny. I just said to Jen before I went live, FDR, the only thing to fear is fear itself.
Very true.
And Gerardo, true sentiment. So I'm going to read you this article. But tell me if you see something that's just stunning right out of the gate. Right out of the gate. Democrats won't defeat Trump by becoming the Trumps of the left, with an image of Bernie Sanders. So right there, and this isn't the first time the Washington Post has done this. Right there, forget what the story is about. A lot of people, honestly, on Twitter or elsewhere, literally browse a headline, see a picture, maybe scan a story for like a sentence, and move on. That's what I do half the time. I don't read every single article because my brain would be an aneurysm by 11 a.m. There's too much. So most people just read a headline, a picture, maybe a sentence, and decide if they want to keep going. So you got the Washington Post here essentially equating Bernie Sanders with Donald Trump. So who's this by? Who's this author? Max Boot. Max Boot. Well, let me tell you about Max Boot. Max Boot. Max Boot is a major neocon. And he was he might as well have been he was a Republican, excuse me. He was a Republican. And he was cheerleading for the Iraq War like nobody's damn business. Like, on the same level with Bill Kristol. On the same level with Bill Kristol back in those days. So, like Hillary, you know, he saw Jesus and he's atoned for his sins. And as Glenn Greenwald always points out and others, in the pundit world, there is no penalty for being wrong in a way that gets hundreds of thousands of people killed around the world, being wrong in a way that creates ISIS. That actually, instead of getting you thrown off cable news and getting thrown off, writing columns for the Washington Post, you get more contracts, you get more airtime, and you get more columns. It's really backwards. It's really backwards. See, I was taught, I only took one journalism class, but I was taught if you get facts wrong, if you put out propaganda, if you mess up and have to issue major corrections constantly, you'll lose your credibility. That's what I was taught. By the way, I'm thinking about starting my own journalism training program. If anybody's interested in journalism and you want to be mentored by little old me, let me know. Thinking of starting that, but we'll talk about that another time. But this guy is colossally wrong. He's been pushing Russiagate like nobody's business. And what do you know? He gets booked on CNN and MSNBC and all over the place because he's a Russia hysteria agent. So I'm going to read you just a little bit about this because I really can't stomach it. But it's so ridiculous. Students of civil wars know they follow a well-established dynamic. A sect radicalized by militant leaders commits atrocities against another sect. The targeted group retaliates with its own massacres and thus begins a cycle of violence. Think Serbs first Bosniaks in the former Yugoslavia, Sunnis first Shiites in Iraq, Hutus first Tutsis in Rwanda. I fear that a similar process of mutual radicalization is occurring in America, minus, mercifully, widespread physical violence. Political attacks such as the death of Heather Heyer in Charlottesville last year, or the fight that broke out in New York City last week between progressive protesters and a right-wing hate group called the Proud Boys, are still isolated occurrences. For now. President Trump is the prime culprit. He claims Democrats are traitors who want to open the borders to murderers and rapists who perpetrated an evil hoax to stop Supreme Court nomination Brett Kavanaugh and who are determined to turn America into another Venezuela, a bankrupt socialist dictatorship. While accusing the opposition of mob rule, he has incited its followers to scream "lock her up," first against Hillary Clinton and now against Dianne Feinstein, neither of whom have been charged with any crime. Dianne Feinstein should be charged with a crime, so should Hillary Clinton, but I digress. Some of Trump's mini-me's are even worse. Scott Wagner, the GOP candidate for governor in Pennsylvania, threatened his Democratic opponent, Governor Tom Wolf. "You better put a catcher's mask on your face because I'm going to stomp all over your face with golf spikes." Then he gets into Stephen Miller and Ted Cruz have been hounded at restaurants. Oh, my Lord, they've been hounded at restaurants. To stop Kavanaugh, some Democrats weren't satisfied with citing Christine Blasey Ford's highly credible testimony. They also embraced unsubstantiated charges from a woman represented by headline-chasing attorney Michael Avenatti, who claimed that Kavanaugh had been complicit in gang rapes in high school. So, moving off of Bernie for a second, I'm going to get to the Bernie part because this guy is, excuse me, YouTube, a fucking idiot. Take my money, but you won't take my soul. Thank you, OTR Tucker, getting the super chat going, $5. Trump hates Bezos. Trump loves Saudis. Post columnist murdered by Saudis. Trump says nobody knows what happened to him. I'm going to get to it. I'm getting to it. Covered that a little bit yesterday, but I'll speak about that a little more. Thanks for the $5. So he's talking about that. I think he's talking about Julie Swetnick, who was the third woman to make an accusation against Brett Kavanaugh. Didn't make an accusation that Brett Kavanaugh himself had assaulted her, but did make an accusation that she saw him on a line that was going into a room where a woman was getting gang raped. But when you say unsubstantiated claims, yeah, the FBI wouldn't talk to her, and they wouldn't talk to all the people that she said she had to corroborate. So how could you say unsubstantiated claims? This is the stupidity of the mainstream media. you know what? The FBI could have decided if she has credibility, but if you don't talk to her, and if you don't talk to not just her, but several other people that she gave their names, and the FBI wouldn't talk to them, they were themselves trying to reach out to the FBI because the FBI wouldn't talk to them. So spare me your bullshit, Max Boot, about, unsubstantiated claims. There's a thing called you can't find what you're not looking for. I digress. Moving back onto Bernie. So Mr. Boot has a problem with the Democrats or progressives chasing Ted Cruz in restaurants, and apparently Michael Avenatti and all this. He said, Max Boot said, I got a taste of this leftist anger when I went on NPR's On Point last Thursday as part of my book tour to discuss my disenchantment with the right. One caller insisted that Trump wasn't another Hitler, he was worse. Another listener emailed that I could never be forgiven for being a conservative. Quote, I truly hope you die in agony as a result of the climate change you promoted. 2 days later, The Intercept, the Breitbart of the left. Can you believe this guy? The Intercept, the Breitbart of the left, wrote that I should be permanently exiled from the sanctuary of politics because of my now recanted support for the Iraq War, a position I shared with then Senators Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Charles E. Schumer, among other Democrats. Oh my God. This is the arrogance. This is the arrogance and the out-of-touchness of these idiots. First of all, most people with a brain, with a heart, with some empathy, actually think if you want to run for office, it's a disqualifying position if you were for the Iraq War. You could call us, the progressive purity test, but I think that's a disqualifying position, especially if you want to run for president. But if you want to be a pundit on TV or you want to write a column, yeah. When you don't do your homework, when you go around with dangerous groupthink that leads to almost 4,000 American soldiers being killed, their living victims, meaning their families that have to go on without them, the hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed and wounded in Iraq, the destabilization in the Middle East, the creation of ISIS and countless other things, yeah, I do think the Breitbart of the left, which is ridiculous. The Intercept has won many awards. Sure, they've made mistakes too, but I think their reporting is spot on for the most part. Yeah, you should be tossed out of, quote, the sanctuary of politics. Just like Hillary Clinton shouldn't have run for president. Sorry. When you've this thought that, give me a mulligan. Just give me a mulligan. Give me a do-over. I'll get it better next time. Usually this mentality of war, a lot of times for political reasons. Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War for political reasons. Not because she, in her heart, thought it was the best thing. Well, she probably did because she's a warmonger too. But you shouldn't get a mulligan. If you are paid to give your opinion, or if you are paid to be a reporter, just because you're giving opinion doesn't mean you don't have to have a set of facts that are correct. I always have said the criteria that I rate myself isn't whether I'm neutral. It's not whether I'm openly progressive or neutral. It's whether are my facts correct? Are my facts right? It doesn't matter if I'm progressive, conservative, or an underwater seal. Are my facts right? Most people actually appreciate it when someone's open and upfront about their ideology. And my ideology informs what I cover or not. It doesn't inform my facts. But if I continually came to you every day and reported stuff that wasn't true, or I gave you opinions that ended up being based on things that weren't true, well, no, I shouldn't have a camera on me. Now, if I royally fuck up once, which has happened, and I correct it, and we move forward and I'm more careful, maybe I'll mess up again in my career. But there's proportion for everything. But if I came to you, I wasn't old enough at that point, but if I was coming to you live every day, pushing this Iraq war, either as a reporter or a commentator, yeah, you should kind of be pushed out. You should. Sorry.